Shabbat actually is special for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that our Introduction to Judaism class that Rabbi Krinsky leads is here. So welcome Introduction to Judaism class for your Shabbaton. At some point there's like a textbook for the class, but we used to like have everybody buy a dozen different books until one book was written that actually captured everything we needed our Introduction to Judaism students to know. And that book is called Here All Along, Finding Meaning, Spirituality, and Deeper Connection to Life in Judaism After Finally Choosing to Look There. It's a long title. Why is it such a long title? The book was written by Sarah Hurwitz, who is spoken from our microphones many times over the years. Sarah served as the White House speechwriter from 2009 to 2017, first as a speechwriter for President Obama, and then as head speechwriter for First Lady Michelle Obama. She is an incredible teacher of Torah. She has training in mindfulness, meditation, chaplaincy, and has an overall understanding of coming to Judaism as an adult in ways that many of us cannot even comprehend, let alone imagine. She has also been traveling around to college campuses over the past 5 weeks. And so we are, they're like, oh, well, that's relevant. All the other stuff. We are grateful that you are going to talk to us a little bit tonight about your understanding of the world as it is, maybe as it should be too.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is, and thank you for creating this space. Like, what a joy it is to be here, especially after a month of visiting college campuses. So Rabbi Alexander asked me to talk about what I've seen on a recent speaking tour of college hillels on campuses around the country. And he also asked me to talk about what is giving me hope right now. At first, that invitation seemed like a little bit of a contradiction because college campuses, not the most hopeful place for Jews right now. And that's actually particularly true of the schools I visited. At several of these schools, students told me that campus clubs that are devoted to social justice and inclusion, clubs representing women, LGBTQ and minority students, the Socialist Club, the Environmental Club, they've all allied themselves with Students for Justice in Palestine, which is an organization that celebrated the terrorist attacks on Israel as justified resistance. I asked students on one campus, well, which clubs are allying with the Jewish students? And there was this awful silence. And then one of them muttered, none of them. Another student told me that on their campus, if you go to Hillel, even if just to attend a Shabbat dinner or study with a rabbi, you may be ostracized for being a Zionist. And on many campuses, that word has been twisted into a smear. That means supporting colonialism and apartheid, in quotations. Seems to be a trendy kind of thing in academia today to divide the world into oppressors and oppressed and to label the Jews as oppressors. So when Jewish students say that they feel vulnerable or when they try to express their grief or their anxiety, they are often mocked and disbelieved, particularly on social media. Many of the students who I talked to told me they feel really isolated, that their roommates are increasingly hostile, that classmates they thought were friends are posting hateful things on social media, and they worry that their professors might treat them differently because they're Jewish. One student actually told me a story that went something like this. I was talking to a professor after class, and I told her I was Jewish. I didn't mean to, it just slipped out, and then I thought, oh, no, I may have just ruined my chance of getting a letter of recommendation. But then it turned out the professor was Jewish, and we had this really nice conversation. Like, the worst part about this story is that she told this story to me as a heartwarming example of Jewish peoplehood. She really thought this was a heartwarming example of Jewish peoplehood, which I guess it was, but still. You know, I tried to be helpful. I tried to give them some tools to understand anti-Semitism. I told them about the author Dara Horan's distinction between Purim anti-Semitism, which is we hate the Jews, let's kill them. That's pogroms, the Holocaust, synagogue shootings. And what Horn calls Hanukkah anti-Semitism, which is we're not going to kill the Jews. We just demand that they disavow whatever we currently view as unacceptable about Jewish civilization. Today, on many college campuses, that means disavowing Israel. And only once you do that will you be accepted. And I told the students, when your classmates demand that you disavow your ancestral homeland in order to be accepted, they are claiming the right to define your identity for you, which is an act of domination that we would never tolerate against any other minority group. I also tried to explain that what they're seeing on their campuses today is not new. It's actually a very old story that rests on the lie that Jews are overwhelmingly preternaturally powerful. That is what the Germans claimed when they accused Jews of stabbing Germany in the back during World War I and causing an economic crisis and polluting the entire German race. The Germans were obsessed with Jewish power. For the record, Jews were just 0.7% of the German population. It's true that many Jews were professionally accomplished and culturally influential. Back then, 16% of German lawyers and judges were actually Jewish. But while Jews had status, what they did not have is power. And it turns out there is a life or death difference between status and power. I explained a lot of things to the students, but I am not sure any of it helped. I think we all know that this neural groove of anti-Semitism has been worn into the Western world psyche for more than 2,000 years, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. So I am worried about these kids. I am enraged that they have to deal with this kind of ugly and just profoundly stupid anti-Semitism. But I have to tell you, as I listened to these students, I also felt something else. I felt pride. And I felt amazement. I actually did start to feel some hope. To be honest, before I began my visits, I had really low expectations. I figured these kids were part of a generation whose brains had been kind of softened by social media. I assumed they would think in memes and speak in slogans and shout over each other and shut each other down. I thought there'd be a lot of canceling. But what I found was the exact opposite. They spoke with such nuance and precision and care. They would express an opinion and then immediately list the arguments against it. And then they would acknowledge the counter-arguments to those arguments. They listened respectfully to each other, even to wildly diverse opinions. And they gently corrected classmates who had their facts wrong. And for weeks now, these kids have been holding dignified vigils where they mourn the lives of innocent Israelis and innocent Palestinians. And they expressed anguish about hostages and about humanitarian concerns. And they just keep on singing and praying, even while throngs of their classmates are screaming for intifada and accusing them of genocide. I could not get over it. And I also could not figure it out. How had they turned out this way? But eventually I realized, because their feelings are so often dismissed, they've learned to seek out facts and to get them straight before posting on social media. Because they know their classmates will relentlessly question their arguments, they've learned to question themselves. And because their stories are often decentered, they spend a lot of time listening to other people's stories and opinions. And they have learned how to hold opposing viewpoints and to wrestle with them. It is a heartbreaking irony that Jewish students are the ones who actually seem to be getting an education on college campuses today. And in doing so, they are truly taking their place in Jewish tradition. This is the very process of Jewish tradition. As Amos Oz and Fenya Al-Salzberger wrote, Jews are not a bloodline, but a text line. For thousands of years, we have been questioning and debating and wrestling with our sacred texts. And we have carried these texts with us across the globe. We've lived by their wisdom, and we have enraged so many people with our stubborn refusal to disappear. All those peoples who were around when we first started out, the Ammonites, the Hittites, the Moabites, they are all gone, but we are still here. And we're still uttering the same prayers we offered in our ancient temple in Jerusalem. We're still painting street signs in Tel Aviv and posters advertising Hillel events here in America with the same letters we etched into parchment thousands of years ago. Our God called us stiff-necked, and I know it wasn't a compliment. I know it's one of our worst traits, but I think it is also one of our best. And I see that stubbornness in these college students. I see how they keep going to Hillel and wearing their Magen Davids and supporting each other and standing up for themselves. This one student proudly showed me a 4-page letter that she wrote to a campus organization in which she'd experienced anti-Semitism. And in this letter, she explained in devastating detail precisely why she was renouncing her membership. I mean, just point by point, she took them down. It's very impressive. And one Hillel director I know, she sent a message to her students just to check in on them, and she showed me the responses she received, many of which included the word proud. The students told her it was hard and lonely right now, but that they were hugely proud to be Jewish. So these kids are holding a lot, but this is what we do as Jews. We are seeing it every day in Israel. We're seeing people grieving loved ones who were killed, who are volunteering to help those who've survived. We see people who are trying to keep up their kids' spirits during the day while worrying alone at night about their spouses on the front lines. And I'm thinking in particular of the Israeli soldier who turned his army base into his wedding hall, and of the bride wearing her army fatigues and a veil at the very moment that so many Israelis were going from funeral to funeral. Rabbi Alexander actually gave a brilliant sermon about this a few weeks ago, about how our ancient rabbis asked, when a wedding procession and a funeral procession reach an intersection at the same time, which goes first? It seems, Rabbi Alexander said, like one of our sages' absurd hypotheticals. When has such a thing ever really happened? But it's been happening in Israel. Weddings crashing into funerals. And it actually wasn't a hypothetical for our ancient rabbis either, because they were also survivors. The Romans had leveled their cities, murdered their people, destroyed their temple, but somehow they managed to repair that breach in our text line. Just as somehow our grandparents and great-grandparents built and fought and rose from the ashes to bring our people back home. It really is something. All these centuries of weddings crashing into funerals, catastrophic destructions, and breathtaking rebirths. It is hard to believe that any one people can hold so much without breaking. And yet we do. And we still insist that the wedding must go first. And this, I think, is what chosenness really means. Not that we are innately better than anyone else. We are not. But that we are a tiny people chosen for a very big life, and we choose it back with joy. And that's what these Jewish college students are doing. And at this very dark time, they really do fill me with so much hope. Shabbat Shalom.